Thanks for tuning in to the 3D Tutor.
Hey guys, and welcome to a brand new tutorial. This time I'm going to be focusing on building a interior in 3ds Max for use in the Unreal 4 engine. Now this method can be moved across and used on different engines, but the scaling may not work, so you'll have to adjust the scaling. So obviously, you know, the size of your rooms and your interior and objects and things like that are correct for the engine itself. But because we know this is Unreal, right, we're going to be sticking to centimeters because that is 1 unit in Unreal. Therefore, it will, you know, make sure that anything we create in here, as long as it's scaled correctly, it will transfer across with no problem. So what we're going to do is I'm going to first of all just go to reset. Now this is obviously a little kind of demo area. We've started off with a room, gone into a hallway, and there's another door on the opposite side, as you can see there, that we can then create another room and a hallway leading upstairs and to an upper floor. So we're going to start this tutorial just kind of working on this main kind of area, and then I'll be releasing additional tutorials on how to get, you know, let's say a second floor, how to texture the room properly, and all the other bits as well. So I'm going to go with resetting my 3ds Max. Now before you do anything in here, we need to make sure that our units are set up. So you go to customize, unit setup, and you want to make sure you change it from generic units to metric, and then you're going to change the drop down to centimeters. So you're going to go to that. Next you're going to go into system unit setup and do exactly the same. Make sure you change that. The default I believe is inches, change it to centimeters. Okay, so that's really important. You want to make sure you change both those options. Next, we're going to go into Photoshop. Okay, here you can see my blueprints that I drew really quickly in Photoshop. I used just a line tool, which can be found down here. And the line tool, and then I drew this out. Now obviously I've got a bit of a design flaw. I've got the stairs here which lead into a wall, which is obviously not very useful. So what I did with my final design was I actually rotated that so the stairs kind of bent left, or should I say the stairs were going just in the left direction leading up to a second floor. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be showing you a couple of ways. Now this is obviously using the line tool, so I literally selected a line tool. That's obviously a thick line, but holding shift I just drew lines out, making sure that there's a fill. I'm going to go with no stroke as well. What I did was I literally sort of clicked, drag down, shift, click, drag down. Now holding shift, like I said, ensures it's a straight line. So what I did was I just did that just to get the shape, and then I worked in the walls and the doors and things. So that's how I did it, you know. So if you want to go ahead and create one in Photoshop, that's fine. You don't at this stage have to worry too much about the scaling of the rooms in Photoshop, because, you know, I'm not an architect, so I know a lot of architects and people that are a bit OCD about these things are going to be pretty angry about this right now. But I assure you, when you take this into 3ds Max, the scaling will work perfectly. So we'll have to adjust a few things obviously, but don't worry, don't get hung up on that kind of stuff too much, and we'll talk about, you know, getting the scaling of the rooms correct in a little while. Okay, the second way of getting your interior drawn, and probably a better way, but I'm just lazy so I didn't go through this process, but you go onto floorplanner.com, which is one of the many free sites available on creating blueprints. Now what I like about this one is you can set it, and I'm sure a lot of them do, is you can set it to meters. So you don't want it in feet, you want to set it to meters, and then you can go ahead and create. You can go to draw room, and you can literally draw a room out. Now we can start from a corner there, and we can draw this out in any size we want, but obviously you want it to remain sort of fairly realistic. So I'm going to go to about here, and that's the room created. Now if I was to sort of drag one of these walls across, you can kind of see the length of the inner walls. That's what we're concerned about. We don't need to worry about the length of the outer wall, which is a little bit higher. So you would probably want to go for, you know, a relatively kind of decent sized room. It depends on what you're creating, you know, and then you can expand on this, you can add other things, you can do whatever you want really. You can create things and draw them and place them in there. So if you want to place like a corner sofa there, you can do that. You want to create a little chair in this corner, and you can rotate it and stuff. And then you can also expand on the rooms as well. Okay. Now once you've done that, you can save this, you can export it as an image as well. So this way you kind of know that the scaling works, and there's probably a better way than what I did. So we're going to go ahead and draw out our character template size. So I'm going to go and create a box, and make sure it's set to the correct scale. So 192 cms by 84 by 84, and that's going to tell us the size of the character. Now if we zoom out now, I'm just going to reset my viewport to shaded so the shadows don't annoy me. That's going to show us right now that if we were to make an interior of this size, take it into a game engine like Unreal 4, currently the character's going to be this big, and your interior will look more like a dollhouse interior like I was saying earlier. So you want to make sure that we get that scaling correct. So what I tend to do is literally go on the scale tool, scale with the middle of the scale tool, and to scale a lot bigger. You're going to increase that size until you can then, let's go a little bit smaller, something like that's going to be fine, until you can then select your box, literally move it around, make it seem like it's your interior, and you kind of get an idea of the sort of layout and the scaling. So if this was your character and he was moving around the environment, would he be able to go in and move around freely, you know, going upstairs and things like that? The door widths aren't that important anyway, but in terms of the room, is there enough space there? Now I think that's pretty good. I don't want my rooms to be really huge. I want them to be a decent size, a size of which, you know, it's like a bog standard house. I don't want it to be like a mansion. So I'm pretty happy with that scaling. Now if you had gone to floorplanner.com like I mentioned to you earlier, what you will know is the length and the width of your rooms. Now if you know what the length and things like that are, you could just create like a box as a template. Now this isn't the actual wall, this is just a template to tell us the width. So if you knew that, let's go into the modify panel, if you knew that your length of the room was, and this is actually the thickness of the room, so this isn't even that important, so I'm going to go to about 25. If you know the width was, let's say 9 meters, right? 9 meters is still pretty damn big, so let's go a little smaller. If you knew that was 8 meters across as a room, you know it'd be 800 cm. So we're going to change it to 800 cm. So that's going to then tell you what size to scale your blueprint until it fits this. So if you know this room, that particular wall is 800 cms or 8 meters, because in floor planner you can get meters up, and you know that you've got to scale that so it fits. So you're going to go and scale this a little smaller, and you're just going to move it back. We'll move this template wall that we've just created until it's roughly the same size. So obviously a little bit of scaling will still be required, but just to make it a little bit bigger again, but you kind of get the idea of how you can get the scale as accurate as possible. Okay, and there's various different ways, but I want this to be fairly quick and painless in terms of setting up an environment. So I'm going to go ahead and make that environment bigger again, just because I preferred it that way. And I'm going to now move on to the modeling process. So we've got this character template box. We know that the scaling's fairly good in the environment. It's going to give us plenty of space to move around and stuff like that. We don't want it to be too big, because that would be a big problem. It would just look empty, and it would take a lot of work to fill up that space, and also it just won't look right. Your assets would look too small. You know, there'll be too many spaces between objects in your environment, and it just wouldn't look very good. So we're going to go ahead and now start modeling this. So we're going to go to create a new box, and you can use the top view for this if you prefer. So I'm going to go and start with this room just here. I'm not going to start with the hallway, believe it or not. I could, but I prefer starting from the like one of the front rooms. So I'm going to go ahead and draw a box out, and this can be very loose at this stage. I'm just going to push it up as well. Now the height of the room we can go into a little bit later. Now if we know that our character height is about 192, the door dimensions, which we're going to go into a little bit in a short while actually, is 214. I probably want the room to be about as tall as, I don't know, let's say about 230. What is 214? So maybe 16 cms above the door. I'd say it probably needs to be higher than that. Did I just do 130? Did I mean 130? No, I think I meant 230, so I don't know why I did that. But I still think it needs to be higher. From the top of the door, it's going to be more than just, you know, like 16 cm. So let's go a little bit higher. Let's go to about 260. I think that's going to be a bit better, and then we'll see a little later and make adjustments if we need to. So that's our first room. Now we've got the first room, which is okay, but obviously right now it's not quite the right, or the polys don't face the right way, put it that way. We can't see inside the room, meaning we don't know how to edit it, we don't know where to place objects if we were to edit it in that way and place like sofas and tables and things like that in there. So what we're going to do is we're going to go into edit poly. So again, when you create this box, make sure there's no segments going down the length, width or height, and we're going to convert this to an editable poly. Now within here we're going to literally select all the polys, so you can do that by going to element, selecting the object, and it will select all the polys, click flip, and it will flip those polys inside out. Now to make it so you're able to see the inside of the room, you can right click on the object and go on to object properties and then enable backface cull, and that will give you an effect like this. Obviously there's a bit of a glitch where the planar is overlapping the ground or the floor of the room, so I'm just going to select the actual blueprint and just push it down very slightly. Okay, that's going to just push it away a little bit and stop that little graphical glitch. So that is now the room kind of set out. Now if you want to adjust the size of your room, or if you want to just sort of, if it's not quite right and it's not quite meeting the deadline, it's not quite meeting the floor plan, then what you need to do is you've got to select the polys and then you've got to move them. Okay, now when you're selecting polys and you have backfacing polys, you want to make sure you select ignore backfacing. What that means is going to ignore any polygons that are facing away from you. It just makes things a little bit easier because then you select the ones that are facing you and the ones that you can see. So I could literally select that single poly and I could make an adjustment on the room in that way. So I'm going to leave it how it is right now because it's fairly good. And now we're going to talk about, you know, like the room. So let's go, let's move this around, let's put him into the room like that. Now the room still looks way too short for me because as a character, you know, if you put your arms up to reach the ceiling, it is a fair distance away, it's not sort of elbow height. So I'm going to raise the room a little bit. Now again for this, what I can do is I can literally just select the poly on the top and just move it up until I'm fairly happy with that scaling. But if you want it to be a particular perfect number, you could do this before you convert it to an edit poly, okay? Because once you do that, you know, you can't really adjust the room size based on a specific size anymore. You have to kind of do it by hand and things like that. Now there are ways that you can check the size of your room. So if you were to go into utilities, you could use the measure tool, and that'll tell you sort of the width and all the other bits and bobs. So currently in the Z we're 292 cms in height, which is fine. I'm going to leave it like that. Now let's create the door. So what we need to do, I'm going to make a change to this. I'm going to call this character box, and then what I'll do is I'm going to make a copy of this. So shift and drag it across. I'm going to call it door box, and then I'm going to scale that so it is the size of the door. So I'm going to go back into this file here. The width for the door is 104 and the height is 214. So 104, maybe no, this one should be 104, and this should be, the height should be 214. Now this all depends on which side your door is on. Like you can always rotate it. So if you find that you've created a door shape like this and it's not the right orientation, like it's not rotated correctly, you can go on to rotate and make sure you turn angle snap toggle on. And what that means is when you rotate this, you can rotate it by 90 degrees and it will snap every 5 degrees, so you can get a really clean rotation with it. Or you can of course adjust the parameters below down here as well, so whichever you prefer, but that's fine for me. So I'm going to actually go in my top view. I'm just going to go back so I can see all my viewports, and I'm going to move that box so it's roughly where the door needs to go. Now as you can see, the door that I drew in my template is not very accurate because it's a bit too wide. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of best guess it and place it in the middle. Okay, so that's going to be fine. Now this door is fairly tight for the character size. Like if I just change the color of this to let's go with like a purple or something. If I was to move this in, you can see it's a fairly kind of tight size from left to right. But to be fair, that works perfectly fine in the engine. I've tested it. I guarantee it will work. There'll be no issues with going through the door. You won't have to try, 10 times to get through the door. It'll be perfectly fine. Okay. So next, what we're going to do is we're going to create the outline for the door, because currently we've got a door placed there, but if your character wants to move through, you're still going to hit that wall which is behind the door. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this door template box as a guideline to cut out a door shape. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into edge. I'm going to select the top and bottom edge on this far wall, and then I'm going to go on to connect and connect two edges. Now once I've done that, I can obviously pinch them together, hit the tick, and move them across as well, so they're kind of roughly placed where I want them to go. What I always recommend is that you leave a bit of space anyway, so I'm going to move the left one across. You want to leave a little bit of space. Now the reason for that is because you're going to end up having to create a door frame. You're not going to add it onto this particular, you're not going to model it from this wall. You're actually going to create it as a separate asset, and what that allows you to do is it allows you to actually go in and use that door frame on all the different doorways in your environment. So you can recycle that same model over and over again. Again, you can make changes to the textures and things like that, but you definitely don't want to be modeling the door frame every single door way that you've got, because that's going to be a very tedious and long process. So you want to make sure that you make your life a little bit easier. So I've just added one edge and I've placed that above. Again, I'm just going to zoom in. Let's see if we can get that zoom in the right place, and that's going to put a little border around the door again. Okay, so don't worry about it. If it looks a little bit off, do not worry. So now I'm going to select this box. I'm going to move it out the way. I don't need it anymore. Now if I go into here, I can now go in and clean this up, because we know that we have a rule of polys, which is stick to tris and quads. We don't want to have like these 6-point polys. So if you look at this top one here, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. On the bottom, it's going to be exactly the same. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And on these sides here, these panels, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So they're 5 points, which is not what you want. You want to fix this. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to target world on vertices, and we're going to select this vertex above the door. So not the one in the top left corner of the door itself, but the one that attaches to the ceiling. And we're going to then click in the top left corner so it merges or welds onto that point just there. Now on the ground, what we're going to do, like we can't use target weld, else what will happen is this, you won't be able to select it. Okay, we need to select both of those vertices together, so holding control, selecting them both, and then we're going to go on to connect, and what that's going to do is it's going to place an edge between those two verts, and that's going to be a nicely clean model now. Okay, you got tris, quad, quad. So it's all nicely fixed. Now once you've done that, we're going to go and select the poly for the door. This is where it gets a little bit tricky. You want to make sure that when you extrude this backwards, a lot of people have said, oh, can we just delete it? Done? No, that's not really the way you should be doing it, because you want to sort of feed into the next room from this singular object. So we're going to go and extrude this. We're going to go minus. Now again, if you want the wall thickness to be a particular size, you can set it to 10 cms or whatever you want really. I'm going to stay to 10 cms because that's okay. I don't want the walls to be too thick on this particular environment. I'm going to then hit the tick. In fact, we don't have to hit the tick. What we can do is we need to then extrude all the way down to the end of that next space. So you could be leading into another room. That could be the way your environment is. It doesn't have to go into a hallway. But whichever one it is, you want to make sure you hit the plus. And what that does is it adds a secondary extrusion. So you're then going to control that extrusion by taking it down until it reaches the end of that next space. So I'm going to keep going. I'm going to stop around about here. I'm actually going to go ahead and hit the tick now. So now you've got that. You kind of got your first room modeled, and you can then go and expand on the second space as well. So you can literally select the polys and extrude. Like I could just hit the tick and then just move that poly across, and that'll be fine. So I'm going to do the same here. I'm going to extrude that. Now when you extrude and you've got a bend in the hallway, it's really important that you don't extrude all the way down to the end. I'll explain why in a moment. So if you extruded to there, we'd have a bit of a problem because we wouldn't be able to extrude this hallway just here, how it kind of bends across. So the trick is to just move that first extrusion so it's kind of in line with that sort of bend. See, that's probably close enough. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go and extrude again, but this time to the end of the hallway on this side. So now what we'll have is this little panel just here to be able to extrude all the way down. So again, you can just extrude a little bit and then use the move tool just to pull it all the way down to the other side. Okay, so you can kind of see how we're building that interior. Now before I move on and go back to the first room to create windows, I'm just going to tell you, you can probably notice here that, you know, this second space is really short because it's the equal height to the door itself, or to the doorway, and we don't want that. We want to make sure that it's the same height as this one. So we're going to select all the polys on the top. We're not going to move up, because what that will do, if you look at the top of the doorway just here, you definitely don't want to just move. It's going to stretch that top poly of the door, and that's a big no-no. So you're going to extrude this up and go down until you're kind of roughly in the right place. Now I'm going to deliberately leave this one up a little bit higher than the first room, because I'm going to show you how you can fix this. And you can see in this left orthographic view that they're not the same height. I'm going to show you how we can fix this. So we go into vertice, you zoom out, you select all the verts across the top of the ceilings, you go onto the scale tool, and what you're doing is you're going to scale simply down like this. You're not going to scale with the middle of the scale tool, because what that will do is it will bring it all in together like that, which is a big no-no again. You can do it from any viewport. You're going to scale literally down on a singular axis, so on the z-axis. And as you scale, what you do is if you expand the scale, it increases the space between those verts. But by scaling down, if you keep going and going and going and going, if you look in that left view now, the heights are exactly the same. Okay, so you're literally scaling down in height until you compress the space between both of those so much that they become a straight line. Now, there's also a bit of cleanup required inside this interior. So I'm going to go with target weld, and I'm going to think about the quads. So I'm going to clean up that bit just there. In fact, I'm going to leave the cleanup for now. And the reason for that is just because if I want to place a door on the outside, then that's going to be the perfect spot for it. And I want to leave that edge just there intact, because that's the height of the doors. I don't want to then have to connect again. So if I clean this up, if I did this, I'd have to then come back and add another edge again, and it will just get messy. So I'm going to leave it exactly where it is. We'll leave the cleanup for now. That's something we can do sort of towards the end of the modeling process anyway. It's not going to be too long. Now, to create your windows is going to be a very similar thing. We can go to the door. It's going to be quite similar, but it's going to be a little bit different. We can select the poly. So here, this is the front of the house facing forwards. We're going to then go on to inset. So you're going to click onto inset, and you're going to increase the outline. Obviously windows aren't really shaped like this unless you've got a really kind of cool house. So I'm going to place this window frame roughly about here. I want it to be a fairly big window, but I don't want it to be too big. Once again, if you have an exact scale for your windows, then you can create a box and make sure that it is the right size. So, you know, the length could be something like, I don't know, 2 meters. And the width could be, sorry, the height could be something like 1 meter. Or no, 1.5 meters. Otherwise 1 meter is going to be too short. 150 cms that would be. Totally getting my units wrong. Somehow I've reset that, so let's go back and make that higher. So if that's your window, and that's okay, you can place that where it needs to go. I might go a little wider again, so let's go with like 3 meters. Okay, so a really big window in the main room, the front room of the house. And that's kind of roughly where it needs to be in the middle. And again, we can adjust the position later. I'm going to leave it where it is because that looks pretty good. Think about the position of the window. It's normally placed a little bit higher than the ground, so we don't want to place it exactly in the middle. Just lift it up a little bit like that. Now, as you can see, you know, I'm going to sort of roughly get this where it needs to go, because we know that the inset is directly in the middle of this wall. So this is going to be a good guideline to tell us where we need to place this. So that's kind of okay. That's okay, works quite well. Now I'm going to go in and select the vertices and literally move them across to be just outside that again. So similar to the door, I'm going to go in and I'm going to place those edges just outside the edges of that window frame. Okay, it's really important again, just so we can ensure that when we create the window frame, and this is something we'll create as a separate asset again, something we can recycle, that's going to fit pretty nicely. So this box right here, this becomes our template for the window frame. So we don't want to delete that. You want to make sure you name it. You can call it front of house, so then if I create different size windows for the back of the house, I can differentiate between the different window frame template boxes. Now again, once you've got that, you can literally select the poly and you can extrude that back. Obviously you don't want the window to go in that much, but I want to create a little kind of extrusion in, and that's because it will give me some space maybe to put some plant pots or some other ornaments and things along the window, just here along the front of the window. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is pretty much the first steps of creating your interior. I'll just run through one little thing, is if you want to go ahead and create the second room, it'll be exactly the same process. So what you're going to do is you're going to extrude by, let's say, minus 10 cms, because don't forget this one was extruded by 10. So I'm going to go by 10 just to make sure they're the same thickness. I'm going to then extrude all the way down to the end of the room. Again, if you don't want to drag this all the way across, then you can just extrude a little bit and then move it across until you're happy with the position. Select this one here, extrude it. Again, that's way too much, so I'm just going to pull that back. If you want to follow the blueprint and you find it fairly difficult, make sure you keep using that top view. You can also press Alt and X on the object, and that makes it semi-transparent. Okay, so that might make life a little bit easier also. So Alt and X to make your object semi-transparent. Just going to pull all these verts up a little bit because they're not quite in the right place. And that's kind of getting there, you know, we're kind of getting the interior done. And that's that second room done. Once again, you'd probably want to extrude like the ceiling, well, you will want to extrude the ceiling polys. And again, just to run through that same process, if I bring that down, I'm going to show you a little bit more. So if I was to bring this higher, and again, you can see that it is higher. I can literally go ahead, select all the verts across the ceiling, make sure I don't select any others of the window frame or anything like that, and then I'm going to go on the scale and I can scale it down, so then the space between all those verts compresses in only that axis. Now one last thing for the window that I forgot to mention is, if you have your template box for the window frame itself, you don't actually, or in fact you don't even want a poly where the window would go, because you don't want to have a single poly to be the glass or anything like that, because it wouldn't look right. You want to have thickness to it. So I'm going to get rid of that, and that's something you'd probably do in the game engine when you go ahead and place everything in there. So for now you want like an open space where the window is, and everything else is nicely clean. You know, it's all kind of worked out fairly nice. If I wanted to create a door here, obviously I'd move my door template in that position, so I'd go ahead and do something like this. Okay, and then I'd again connect down a couple of times, down, down, target weld things and use connect in vertex, just to make sure we stick to that quad rule. And then we'd go ahead and create this door in exactly the same way, into that room, exactly the same way. Okay, so hopefully this gives you a bit of an outline on the modeling process of your environment. Obviously if you have like symmetrical front rooms like I have, so left and right are pretty much the same, you probably want to use the same window frame, so you can actually go in, use that same one, and what that will do is it will mean you can, when you create the window frame for one room, you can literally recycle it and place it onto this side. Okay, so I will have tutorials in the future showing how to make window frames, how to do door frames and things like that as well, but this is a really good outline on just how to create your very first sort of interior that will work perfectly fine in the Unreal Engine. So if you were to throw this in the engine, and again you can use my tutorial on how to export to the Unreal 4 engine, and that'll allow you to go in there, test out the space, see how it feels to run around in there, you know, and it's a good indicator just to make sure you know you're going along, you know, on the right track. So hopefully you've enjoyed this tutorial. If you have any questions, please do ask in the comment section below, and don't worry, I'm going to have loads more tutorials on how to texture this room, how to do the window frames, how to do the door frames, and also more asset building and other lighting tutorials. Okay, so please do hit that like button, guys. It's very much appreciated. I do spend a lot of time on these tutorials, but I'm just so glad that you guys like them so much, and hopefully, you know, I'm really hopeful that that continues, because it's going to motivate me to create more and more videos for you guys. So on that note, I will catch you next time.